Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about how to find the sum of an arithmetic sequence, or really a series. Okay, so we've already talked about arithmetic sequences, but now we're going to look at arithmetic series. And a series is really just when we take the terms of a sequence and we add all those terms together up to a point. Okay, a stopping term. So this is our sum formula. S sub n, so sum for S, and then n meaning the number of terms. And the values in this are the same as our other formula. So in our other formula, n was the number of terms. It's still the number of terms, often referred to as the nth term. Okay, so n is the number of terms. A is still the first term, just like before. N is the number of terms. And D is the common difference. So that's true for this formula, just like it was for the other one we've been using. Okay, so we just have to look at this and we have to figure out what information do we have and where can we plug it in, and then we might be solving for a missing variable. So remember, this is the sum of n terms, where you might be told what n is and trying to find the sum. Or you might be told the sum and you have to find n. Okay, I do want you to know that there is another formula. There is a shortened version of this that can be used sometimes. This one is always going to work for you. This formula works always. But if you happen to be given some very specific information, you can use this formula. And it's equal to this, where we have 1/2 n is still the number of terms, a is still the first term, but n is the last term. So whatever term I stop at, it's the value of the last term. So if the 12th term is 76, then 76 would be L if 12 is where we want, the 12th term is where we wanted to stop, okay? But you have to be very, very careful, because oftentimes we use this formula when it doesn't work, or we plug in the wrong value, okay? And it would still be equal to S sub n. So this is a possibility if you have exactly the right information, but I tend to always use this one because this one always works, okay? All right, so we're just going to look at some examples. This says, consider the arithmetic series meaning we're adding the terms, so you see the plus signs here. I could still write this as 4, 7, 10, 13, etc. And that's my sequence. But this is just writing it as plus because we're going to be adding it. We're talking about the sum of the series. So if you see this and then they ask you something that's not related to a sum, that's okay, okay? All right, so we are asked to find the sum of the first 30 terms. So you need to first identify your information. N is 30, since we're asked to find the sum of the first 30 terms, that's the number of terms. You can see up here that A is 4, and common difference, D, is any term, so let's say 10 minus the one before it. So 10 minus 7 is 3. So that's my common difference. So now I see the word sum. I have the word sum. I'm talking about a sum. In this case, we want to find it, so I'm going to go to this formula. I stress that because we're going to put all of this together, and you're going to have to determine, are you using a sum formula, or are you using your u sub n formula from before to find an nth term when we are not given a sum, okay? So pay attention to the fact that we are talking about a sum here. So we're going to use this formula up here, and we're going to plug in what we know. We don't know the sum, so we're trying to find that, but we do know n is 30. So I'm just going to write S sub 30. And then 30 is going to go everywhere you see n. So I have an n here, so I'm going to put 30. 2 times A is 4, plus, again, n is 30, minus 1, and then my common difference was 3. I just took this formula right here and I plugged in every value that I knew. And since this side has no variables, I can just solve that side and get my answer for S sub 30. Now, you need to be careful. If you want to do all of this at one time in your calculator, you need to be very careful how you type it in, or you need to break it down into pieces. So if I'm going to do that, 30 times 1/2 is 15. 2 times 4 is 8. 30 minus 1 is 29, and 29 times 3 is 87, a positive 87. So I can break it down there, and then I can add 87 plus 8 and get 95 times 15. And that value is 1,425. And so that's my S sub 30. So when I add 30 terms together, I get 1,429. If I kept going and found all of these terms to the 30th and then added them all together, I would get 1,425. And so it's nice to have this formula to not have to do that. Okay, so I want you to take a minute and I want you to try this problem. Identify the information you have, plug it into your formula, and then check your answer with me. Okay, so we're told that the first term is 7, so A equals 7. The common difference is -2, so D is -2. And then we're asked to find the sum, so we don't know S sub n, that's what we're trying to find, of the first 45 terms, so n equals 45. And again, although you have this on your notes, my formula for sum is 1/2 n times the quantity of 2a plus n minus 1 times d. Okay, and so now I'm just going to plug in. I want to find the sum of 45 terms, so n is 45. 2 times, we know that a is 7. N is 45 again, and d is -2. So all of that gets plugged in. Again, I don't have a missing variable over here. Sometimes you might run into the instance where you have a missing value here, but you know your sum, and so then you could solve for a missing variable. But since all of this, there's no variables here, I can just evaluate it. Okay, so I'm going to do 45 times 1/2, and I'm just going to leave that as 45 over 2. You could write the decimal, and that would be fine. 2 times 7 is 14. 45 minus 1 is 44. Times -2 is -88. And so then I can do 45 over 2 times 14 minus 88 is -74. And this can be done in your calculator, and so the sum of 45 terms is -1,665. Okay, so that's my answer. If I were to add up all the terms up to the point of 45 terms, I would get -1,665. Okay, so I want to look at this problem together. And this one's going to be really important because we're going to start putting the formula for sum and then our use of n formula together. And you're going to have to pick which one to use. And you're going to have to be very careful. So this says determine the number of terms. So that tells us that we don't know n. We're going to be finding n. Okay, in the following arithmetic series. And so they've written this as a series with plus. What I know is that a is 1. I can find d. I can do 1.25 minus 1. So d is 0.25. But in this case, they don't tell me the sum and they don't ask me for the sum. And that's important. So I want to show you something. Our sum formula is 1/2 n and then times the quantity of 2a plus n minus 1 times d. Okay, and if I were to try to use this formula, I don't know n, so n would stay empty. It would stay n. And then in this case, I also don't know this value, so that would stay s sub n. And so if I tried to use this and I plugged in a and d, I would still have too many variables to solve. So this one doesn't work. And if you look at the other one I showed you, the same thing is true. I have a, and in this case I have what would be L, but I don't have n, and I don't have s sub n, and so those two would stay blank, and so I have too many variables. And so when that happens, and again, you're not asked for the sum, and you're not given a sum. So we're going to go back to this formula that we've been using on our previous lesson, okay? This one that has nothing to do with a sum. And in this case, we want to find the number of terms that takes us to get to 8. So this is the first term, this is the second, third, fourth. How many terms did we need to get to get to 8? And so 8 goes where u sub n is. And then we know that a is 1. N is what we're trying to find, so we leave it in. And d was 0.25. And you've done problems like this. I just want you to see that you have to be very careful now to determine which formula to use. And so now we can solve this. So we get 8 equals 1 plus 0.25 n minus 0.25. And so 8 equals, this is going to be 1 minus 0.25, which is going to be 0.75 plus 0.25 n. I'm going to subtract my 0.75 from both sides, and this is going to give me 7.25 equals 0.25n. And then, of course, I'm dividing by 0.25. And n equals 29. So I had to go 29 terms to get to this 8 right here. Okay, so just be very, very careful when you do problems to pick the right formula. Okay, so I want you to take a minute and look at this one and to find out all of your information, set it up, and then solve it and check your answer with me. Okay, so in this case, we're given an arithmetic series. We can go ahead and identify that A is -4. Be very careful, guys, when you're finding D, because a lot of you look at this and you go, oh, that's easy, I know that, and then you miss a sign or something happens. So it's safe to say D is going to be -1 minus the term before it, which is -4. And so in this case, D is actually 3. All right, so I've got A, I've got D. They're asking me to find the sum, so that tells me that this one is going to stay S sub n. I don't know that one. But we're finding the sum of the first 85 terms, so n equals 85. And so I have my sum formula right here, and that's on your notes. And I just need to plug in what I know. So S sub 85, the sum of 85 terms, is going to be equal to 1/2. N is 85. A was -4, don't forget that negative sign. Plus, again, n was 85. Minus 1, and then D is 3. And so again, this one's just like the others. I have all the information I need here, so I can just solve this side. I'm going to leave this as 85 over 2. 2 times -4 is -8. 85 minus 1 is 84, and 84 times 3 is 252. And then you can do 252, or you can do -8 plus 252, and then multiply by 85 over 2 in your calculator. And when you do that, you get 10,370. So that is the value of my sum of 85 terms, because that's what I was finding. I was finding what happens if I add up all of the first 85 terms. The sum would be 10,370. Okay, last problem. I want you to take a minute and try it and then check your answer with me. Okay, so in this case, determine the number of terms. That tells us that we don't know n. We're going to have to find n. We do know here that A is 2. D is going to be -3 minus 2, which is -5. And I do have this term, which can be U sub n or L, depending on which formula I'm using. But notice again, it doesn't ask for the sum, and it doesn't tell me a sum. So I'm going to go to this formula that we've been using. And I'm going to go, okay, I want to get to -398. That's the term I want to get to, and I want to figure out how many terms it took to get there. So that's going to be my U sub n. A is 2. N is what we're trying to find, so we're going to leave it in. And D is -5. So -398 equals 2 plus. I'm going to distribute this -5, and I'm going to get -5n plus 5. So -398 equals 2 plus 5 is 7 minus 5n. Let's move our 7. So we're going to have -5n on this side, and when we do -398 minus 7, we're going to get -405. And then we divide by the -5. So n in this case is going to be 81. And it took 81 terms to get to -398. So even though there were pluses here, we didn't have to do anything with that. We weren't finding a sum. We weren't given a sum. We just wanted to know how many terms it took to get to -398. So they could have given me this exact same question with commas in between, without the plus signs. Okay, so don't get too hung up on that. Pay attention to which formula you need. All right, review what you need to, and we'll work on it in class.